Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm going to be doing a port report for Fatal Frame Maiden of Blackwater, thanks to Koei Tecmo Games for providing a code of the game. So on PC, this game wasn't really a thing on this franchise. It was a Wii U game back in 2014, and for the first time this franchise landed on PC. But as usual, the Koei Tecmo games don't have a good track record on PC ports. So let's get started. First I'm going to talk about the options menu, then we're going to be talking about performance, and in the end about the issues and how to solve them, and some requests for the developers if they ever stumble upon this video. So let's get started. So in the menu to move you need to use the arrows, there is no mouse control. So let's get into the options with the arrow keys. Okay, so the first option is for general settings. This includes operation mode, which is either classic or action. That means that it's two different presets for your controller. And as you can see, at the right of it, you can see your keyboard bindings for each of the buttons, which is good to have. At least we have key bindings from PC on this. And you can also change that for the photo mode. It doesn't seem to be separate though. You either choose one or the other, you cannot combine them, but that's fine. On classic it controls okay, at least for what I tested in the live stream. Then the other things that we have is show the viewfinder frame, so if you don't like the frame when you're taking pictures in the game, you can disable it. And then on search mode and photo mode, you can change the X and Y axis if you want to invert them. So if you want to do that, you can invert the axis for them. But in my case, I just use it like normal people in the normal mode. Nothing against people that use it inverted, of course. And that's basically the general settings. Then on camera sensitivity, it is what it does. Camera sensitivity on the different modes in search mode and in photo mode. So you got different sliders for each of them. Then on display and sound, this should be a big one. We have subtitles on rough. The classic, the most basic option, but it's there. The brightness option, which at least for me, around 2 options over the one in the middle was enough for me to see the ghost in the middle. Then a volume slider, no separate options for volume. You don't have music separated from voices, separated from nothing. It's just a master volume. And then on the audio we got Japanese and English, so it has an English dub and the Japanese voices. Since you guys always ask me to do Japanese voices, I'll keep it there on Japanese. And on the display languages you got English, French, German, traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese, Japanese, and English. There's no Spanish, unfortunately, for all people that speak Spanish over there. And the people that don't have any of those languages, well, there's only English and the languages I just shown. Then there's a reset to default option if you want to reset the options for general, camera sensitivity, and display and sound. For graphic settings and key configuration, the reset default button does not do anything. It only resets the first 3 that you see here. Then graphic settings, this is the one that is always missing in Koei Tecmo PC ports. Well, some games had it, but it's kinda rare, so I'm happy that they put finally a display resolution option in one of the new PC ports. So you got resolution, Windows resolution for your display resolution. Unfortunately, there's no option for custom resolution. So you got fixed resolution from 540p all the way up to 4K. So 540p, 600p, 720p, 768p, 900p, 1080p, and then 1440p and 4K. But if you make, I don't know, 1800p on your NVIDIA control panel or AMD panel, it won't show up in the menu. It only has fixed resolutions, so keep that in mind. If you use custom resolutions, well, those do not work here. Same happens with ultrawide. There's no ultrawide support, so you probably have to wait for a mod for them to add that in. But as of right now, yeah, you got the common resolutions, but it's only 16:9. Then on Windows settings, we got borderless full screen. So one sec, borderless full screen or default. Default is windowed mode, full screen is the classic full screen, and borderless is borderless full screen. So nice to have the 3 options if you are using any upscaling program. It's nice to have. Then overall rendering quality, this is just presets, so you got custom, low, medium, and high. Really, this is kinda pointless, at least in my opinion, because there's only 3 options. You got textures, low, medium or high, anti-aliasing on rough, which I don't know which technique it is, but it's probably some SMAA or something like that. It's probably not TAA, or maybe it's FXAA. At this point, I don't have an answer for that. And then depth of field on rough, if you care about that. What I noticed is that the texture quality can actually affect performance if you are very GPU bound, because when there's a lot of trees and transparent, well, the trees are transparent textures, that usually affects the resolution of those trees as well. So when there are many of them, it can affect performance. So yeah, that's basically the options menu. And then you got the key configuration. So you can rebind your keys, which is great. As you can see, there is Xbox prompts and you can rebind them to PC prompts, and the PC prompts show up on screen when you're using a keyboard. But unfortunately, there is no mouse support. I'm going to talk more about that in a second. But you can basically rewind your keys, which is great on a PC port. But again, to move the camera, as you can see, there's buttons to move the camera. So you cannot move the camera, at least not right now on PC. You gotta using a mouse, you gotta use your keyboard with keys to move the camera, which is very unacceptable, I would say, for a PC game. We should have mouse movement as a minimum, even for aiming the camera, which is a game of taking pictures. Having a mouse to aim would be fantastic. So I'm not sure why they went over that, but I'm going to discuss it in a minute. So yeah, that's basically the options menu. Pretty bare bones, but they had the minimum that they needed, which is a menu with display resolution, not like on Ninja Gaiden Trilogy that you had to put a command before starting the game to select the resolution. So there's options, good to know. Very basic, but they are there. The thing is, there are some things missing that I'm going to discuss in a minute after I talk about performance. So usually when talking about performance, I like taking a look at the system requirements. So according to the developers, the minimum is a GTX 660 or an RX 550, and then on the recommended a 960 or an RX 570. And then the minimum are for 720p 30 to 60 and for the recommended 1080p 60. So here the system requirements are incorrect, on the GPU side at least. With a GTX 660, which is similar to a 750 Ti that I tested, I was able to do 1080p 60 frames per second without a problem, and there was a lot of GPU power to spare. So if you have a GTX 660, you should be able to do 1080p over 60 just fine. Even a GT 1030 can do that, so even in the forest locations it was okay. So these are a little exaggerated, I would say. This is a Wii U game from 2014 with some updates to textures and some other assets. And then on the recommended, there is a GTX 960 mentioned, which is like a 1050 Ti in general for performance. And I tried that out and it was 1080p 60 frames all the time across the board. And 1440p was 60 frames as well. So no issues whatsoever. Again, they seem to be exaggerating with the system requirements. You can even do 4K 30 frames with a 1050 Ti. So on the performance side of things, this game runs fantastically well. Again, it's a 2014 Wii U game, but still, I think it looks okay considering the performance. Runs fantastically well at stable 60 with any configuration I threw at it, again from a 750 Ti all the way up to a GTX 1650, so that's the budget part of this video. And now I'm going to discuss some things they be added to this options menu for this game and the PC port in general, and how to fix some of the problems right now. So talking about all the issues with this PC port and the missing features, well, Koei Tecmo made a few posts on the Steam community page. One of the known issues they acknowledged is that the game may be out of sync when using a high-spec monitor. That means that when your monitor is over 60 Hz, the game was going to cap its frame rate to your monitor's refresh rate using VSync. Unfortunately, when you go over 60 frames, the game was going in fast motion, and when you were below 60 frames, the game was in slow motion, so game speed was tied to the frame rate. So they acknowledge this issue and they are saying how to fix it by capping the frame rate to 60 or selecting a 60 Hz refresh rate from your control panel, which already by the time I'm making this video, they fixed this issue in the first patch, as you'll see right here. On October 29th, they fixed that issue that caused the synchronization problems when using a monitor with high refresh rates. So now the game can run at unlocked frame rates without any issues with game speed. So game speed should be fixed, but I'm going to talk more about that in a second when talking about solving issues. But good to know that they quickly fixed that problem. That was one of the biggest ones, at least in my opinion, because it affected the playability of the game for people that didn't know how to change the refresh rates. And there's also upcoming updates. One says, okay, this is what they fixed today. Another one for mouse control for the camera. So yeah, you're reading this right. The game has no mouse control. If you want to move the camera, you need to map keys on your keyboard. So it's either use a controller or you have to use a keyboard and map keys to the camera movement, which I think is horrendous. I mean, how are they releasing a PC port without proper mouse support? But at least it's better than the Ninja Gaiden trilogy that doesn't even have keyboard support natively, at least not right now. They're going to release a patch. And apparently for November, we're going to get camera motion for the mouse control, which is great. Once that releases, I'm going to be updating you guys on it. So the first issue is on AMD GPUs. Sometimes on AMD cards, it seems that the lighting is broken. So sometimes the characters are super dark, but darker than they should. So on the AMD cards, the faces are not lit correctly. Sometimes the hair is lit incorrectly as well. I'm not sure if that's a thing with the drivers or with the game itself, but it's something worth mentioning. So if you have an AMD card, keep a lookout for that. Maybe the game is a little bit too dark, darker than it should be. So if you're running into that issue, consider rolling back drivers. That might solve it, but post it on the AMD subreddit or something so people with the drivers start looking at it. Another major issue that you might run into that you're seeing right now, the FPS, while they're over 50, the frame times are super inconsistent and there's a lot of GPU power to spare. So why does the frame time look like that? It shouldn't be like that, it should be log 60s at 16.6 milliseconds. Well, while streaming the game, we discovered that by plugging in a controller, that fixes the problem. Look at this. There we go, now the FPS are log 60s and the frame time is almost 100% perfect. So why does this happen? One of my theories for this, some people in the comments were saying, maybe the game is constantly looking for a controller, so many times a second probably, and that's affecting the frame time. I do not know exactly, but I thought that was hilarious. I never saw an issue like that in a video game. So if you're having that issue, well, make sure to plug in a controller. If you don't have a controller, I'm going to have another solution for you. If you're using keyboard controller, well, I have a simple solution. Might not work for everyone, but let's give it a shot. So I'll tab out of the game. So we're back on Steam. Press the Windows key, the one between Control and Alt. Hold that key and press R. And that will open the Run menu. So type in Control, Enter key, and go into Hardware and Sound, Device Manager, this option right here. And in your human interface devices, as you can see, there are many things listed down here. Disable all these ones, human interface device, compliant vendor defined device, all that are called like this, disable them. This might disable your mouse, so be careful with what you disable. Not sure if this will turn off your mouse and keyboard. At least for me, it didn't happen. But once you do so, all the compliant things, are disabled like this. So all these, once you disable them, that should fix the game. You shouldn't need to plug in a controller now. So if you open the game, boom, log 60s again. So that's how you fix the frame time if you don't have a controller. So if you had that issue and you wanted to play with only your keyboard or you don't have a controller around, well, that's the solution. So at the very beginning, when I tested this game on day 1, when I unlocked the frame rate by disabling the VSync option in the NVIDIA control panel, when going over 60 frames, the game was in fast motion, so game speed was tied to the frame rate. And today, as you can see on screen there from my live stream, when it was going super fast, well, they fixed that issue with the patch they released today. So October 29th, they released a patch for the FPS issues. So when you're 120 frames or 144, you no longer have that issue of the fast camera movement and the fast character movement, the game going at Mach 5 speed. Well, that's fixed. As you can see, I'm at 120 frames and the game is unaffected. The only thing that seems to be different is when I move the camera around, the panning of the camera when running with the character appears to be slower. That's maybe something to do with the frame rate. No longer 60 frames is absolutely necessary. Also, when playing at 30 frames, I'm going to cut my frame rate to 30. It's no longer running in slow motion. That's the other issue that we had. The game was in slow motion when it was below 60. Well, that's no longer an issue, as you can notice right now. The game is running at the correct speed. And hang on. There we go. It's gone. So as I was saying, yeah, the movement speed is no longer slow motion, so if you have a lower end GPU that cannot run this game at over 30 frames, sorry, over 60 or at 60 frames, well, now you can actually play it at 30 frames just fine, which is great to see. And this game has forced VSync, so it will put VSync to your monitor's refresh rate. So if you have a 240Hz monitor, you should be able to get 200 FPS locked just fine. And that shouldn't affect the game speed now that they released a patch. So yeah, I'm happy to see that. Good job Koei Tecmo for patching that super quickly, but there's a lot more things that you should be fixing. You should be adding that mouse support to move the camera. I mean, this is a game where you take pictures. It's perfect to have mouse support. I wish we had that option. And then also a VSync option in the menu wouldn't hurt, and a refresh rate option in the menu as well. So we can select 60 Hz, 120, maybe 30 Hz, and VSync on or off. Those will be the main things I'm asking for a future patch. Mouse movement and a refresh rate option in the menu and a VSync option. That's basically what I'm asking for. The bare minimum, actually. But in comparison to the Ninja Gaiden port, this is actually better. It has an options menu. That's how bare bones the previous PC port was from Ninja Gaiden. So now we actually have a menu with resolution and all that. But at least, come on, mouse movement support would be nice for the camera. Again, a game where you take pictures is excellent for mouse. So if we ever get another Fatal Frame, which I hope, I'm enjoying this game quite a bit actually, never played it before, it would be nice to have a mouse support for taking pictures. As you can see right now, this with mouse support would be amazing, at least in my opinion. A much better way to control the game. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this type of content, please let me know in the comments and by liking the video and subscribing if you want to see more. And I'll see you next time. See you later.